PaperX's win in Toronto was the culmination of a career quest for the players. A beautiful moment. But if we zoom out, I believe it also marks a turning point. A moment where Pacific is now the region to beat. And I think you know it's true if I'm the one that's admitting that. 3 out of the last 4 events have had a Pacific winner. And Champions 2024 is the event that breaks that streak for Pacific, and the region as a whole did actually place terribly there. But on the other hand, at Toronto, it wasn't only PaperX who looked like a Pacific team with a chance to win. Gen G were the best team actually of the first half of the tournament, while RRQ beat both of those squads domestically in the previous meta. Rather than simply looking at who won the tournament, perhaps we should be taking into account the average placement for regions at global tournaments. And this would then show if a team, or a region rather, flopped completely, if they barely missed out on a trophy, or if they dominated the event. But we never really use average placement as a metric when the community is discussing regional parity. And you'd have to be some kind of no-life nerd to go back and measure all of that. So I've gone back and I've compiled all of the regional placements for all regions since global tournaments began in 2021. And before we dive into the data, here's some quick fun facts to get us started. 2 regions have had years of dominance. EMEA dominated 2021, while Americas owned 2023. Despite Fnatic being the greatest team of all time, since Partnership, EMEA has actually been the number 3 region. Pacific had never been the best placing region at a tournament until 2025. And China, they placed 3rd at Champs 23 and Champs 24 despite EDG winning in 2024, but at every other event, they were last up until Toronto. And since Partnerships began, America has clearly been the best region, but the writing is on the wall. And it's this tipping point that I want to discuss. Despite America's being the best region over the full Partnership time span, Pacific has taken over, and they could drag the title into their favor by the end of just this year. So let's go through the history of the regions in a little more detail. In 2021, despite excellent North American performances, LATAM and Brazil were just way behind, as was Pacific actually, leading to a gap for EMEA at the top if you want to compare the current 3 regions. At 2021 Champs, even the North American teams dropped off actually, while EMEA had its best performance ever, sealing a year of dominance, the early era for EMEA. And to start in 2022, at Reykjavik, this era was nerfed by outside forces. Russia's invasion of Ukraine put a halt on a lot of player visas, and it led to a massive crash as the top EMEA team, FPX, wasn't even able to attend. And the 3rd seed, Fnatic, had to use 2 subs and just bombed out. Pacific did well though, in the absence of EMEA competition, with Zeta and PaperX coming 3rd and 4th, which was breakthrough performances for both of them. But they lost out to 2 Americas teams, Loud and Optic, in the grand finals, who pushed Americas through to a number 1 finish for the region. After being unable to attend the previous event, FPX broke out with a win in Copenhagen, while Loud slumped, losing in groups, leading to an EMEA revival overall. And while Champs Finals featured Optic and Loud, every EMEA team actually made playoffs, leading to an average highest placement and basically almost 2 years of dominating Valorant. The only blip being when EMEA couldn't even send their best teams or had to use subs. More interestingly, however, 2022 Champs was a particular low point for Pacific after showing that potential at Reykjavik earlier in the year. Despite DRX making 3rd place and it was a banger lower bracket final, no other Pacific team even made playoffs. And for China, this was their first ever showing at a global event. EDG were invited, but they also quickly left after winning only a single map in a winnable group. So now we move into the Partnership era, 2023, things really get started. Lock-in began America's time on top. They professionalized as a region quicker than the others due to increased investment in my opinion, and Americas became the number 1 or number 2 region for every event until Toronto. That's mad. Despite Fnatic winning at Lock-in in Toronto, EMEA was never the best region on average for either event, even losing out to Pacific at Tokyo, as EMEA brought a 4th team, which dragged down the average as well. For 2023 Champs, EMEA got to invite an extra team again, who promptly shit the bed and made EMEA the worst region overall. But if you discount this handicap, EMEA tied with Pacific in the middle, with America still on top and China at the bottom. And just to be crystal clear, even if you discount the extra team for EMEA at Tokyo and Champs, EMEA still would not have been the best region at any event in 2023, despite having the best team of all time in that year at their peak. Definition of a one-team region. Now we move on into 2024. 2024 could actually be counted as the true start date for the regional battle because China entered the game officially after closing the gap decently at Tokyo and Champs 2023. And the regions now also brought the same number of teams to events. There was none of that, like, if you win the previous one, you get an extra team or whatever. Madrid saw a total collapse from EMEA and China, with round differential putting China in last place. Americas and Pacific were also identical up at the top, but Sentinels took the win to keep Americas in first place, and a first place record streak of 4 events in a row, which is still yet to be beaten. At Shanghai, all of the EMEA teams made playoffs again to narrowly overtake Americas, and ironically, while playing in China, the widest gulf since lock-in opened up between China and the next worst region. Tragic home ground disadvantage. This gap, though, closed up again for Champs 2024, which saw EDG win, but the poor performance of Bilibili and FPX still kept the region from even cracking second place. 2024 Champs also marked a historic low for Pacific. It was the worst performance for them since 2021 Berlin, when Pacific was still considered a minor region. Gen G's upset exit in groups alongside the flop from Talon and PaperX put Pacific in a very firm last place. But outside of this one result, Pacific had been fighting for the top spot consistently for the previous year since Champs 2023, in my opinion powered by an explosion of Korean talent, which was starting to make its way to the top. So EMEA had dominated the early years before partnerships began, and then America dominated that first year of the partnership period, admittedly without as many titles. But now, Pacific and Americas in 2024 found themselves fighting neck and neck for first. And in 2025, a breakthrough happened. Bangkok featured 2 Korean teams, powered by that new talent, which saw the underdogs T1 prevailing and winning it all, putting Pacific high up above the other regions. And at Toronto, they kept that same energy, with all 3 Pacific teams making playoffs and creating clear air between them and the other regions scrapping for a low second place. This is the largest gap between a top region and the pack since Americas in Tokyo. And there appears to be no signs of slowing down. This gap was still present in Bangkok, and it widened in Toronto. It was also the first tournament where China made top 2 as a region, pushing Americas out of a top 2 spot for the second ever time. It is a good time to be a fan of Valorant from the Eastern Hemisphere. But hold on, you might say. Surely China wasn't actually the second best region at Toronto. They just looked like that because XLG qualified straight into playoffs based on beating up a bunch of Chinese teams in China. And then they flopped. They weren't a top 8 team, but they're getting the credit for that anyway based on their placement. And okay, fair point. For tournaments like Shanghai and Toronto, where teams get put straight into playoffs based on domestic results, perhaps we should actually be looking at match win rates instead of placement. So, I've also compiled all of the region's match win rates at global events since they began in 2021. And China, by the way, still in second place for Toronto. Get owned, Americans. And the gap, honestly, is still enormous for Pacific in 2025. China does get rewarded more at Champs 2024 because of EDG's success. But it's actually Shanghai that gets flipped completely. China was, of course, still poo, but by placement, the EMEA teams had won out before. They all made playoffs. By win rate, the Pacific teams won handily, with Gen G going undefeated 6-0, just boosting that up. It was the quintessential tournament for top seeds to be dropping like flies, as Fnatic and EDG left as quickly as possible after earning their spot through to playoffs. The graph also illustrates beautifully the drop-off for Americas, peaking with that win at Champs 2023 and kind of slowly falling ever since, even after winning in Madrid. And while the graphs are interesting in their slight differences, the general story is still the same. Almost every tournament in Valorant has multiple regions represented in the finals. But tournaments in 2025 have also had all 4 regions in the top 4. The equilibrium, however, is fragile, and while EMEA and Americas become perhaps complacent, and everybody else is watching the rise of China, it is Pacific who are churning out better and better teams to take over the game. And the pros have noticed. Sheep Esports actually interviewed Jorgamo at Toronto talking about this exact issue, and he tried to tell everyone why you should be paying attention. He said, and I quote, The Americas teams are pretty decent, but I don't see the same passion. A lot of teams just copy whatever's working on a given map instead of innovating. You can really see the difference, like with the Pacific teams running double duelist. They have clear ideas about what they want to do on the map, and they're also just shooters. And a little later he said, "We're gonna be in trouble if we don't look into the Pacific region and learn what they're doing, why they're improving so fast. Pacific may become the strongest region soon." Now it's up to the rest of the Americas teams and Fnatic to prove they can still compete. Love the way that he just rules out anybody else in EMEA. So at the end of this video, I'll end with this. Here's the average placements and win rates for each region since 2021. Now here's the average since partnership began in 2023. And now here are the averages since 2024. Do you see what I mean about a tipping point? It's about to happen. And if you want to learn what exactly the Pacific teams are doing better than everybody else, watch this video here about how T1 won in Bangkok. And keep an eye out for my next video coming out on how this plant denial meta that I talked so much about in that video also worked for PaperX in Toronto.